So the movie, of course, is Castaway, and he names the volleyball Wilson for obvious reasons, and the two become friends quickly. And the interesting thing about Castaway is there are moments in that movie, and I'm trying to figure out a way to say this without spoiling it, but there are moments that his relationship with Wilson is so powerful that people were brought to tears in the theater. There are people who weep in this movie because of conversation or events that happen around this volleyball. And I think part of that is because all of us can relate to the need for companionship and the need for relationship. And so we see a movie like that, and it strikes us that if we were abandoned on an island, we would be desperate for somebody to talk to. And when you think about the word castaway, what are you really cast away from? You know, because you're on land, and there's coconuts, and there's dirt, and there might be plants and mountains, and I mean, you can get that stuff in America. What you're cast away from is people. You're cast away from society, and that's the worst of it. And so I wanted to show you this picture of a deserted island, and just want to know what your feelings would be. Let's say you were in a plane and you crashed, or you were on a boat that sank, and you're hanging out on a piece of driftwood and surviving for a few days, and then you're floating up to this island, and as you get closer, this is the island that you find. Now, do you think that you've won or lost at this point? You'd mumble at that point, apparently, is the solution. I'm thinking I'm a winner because first off, I see huts. And when I see huts, what do I think? People. And then I notice as I get closer, there is at least one person, and that one person does have a boat. And so I am feeling rescued at this point, and it's because of people. If I get up to the island and there's no people, I'm worried. And even in the movie Castaway, you find when he hears coconuts falling in the distance, and every time he turns around, hello, hello, and he's desperate to find people. And I'm convinced that this desperation for people is built in. I think God is a relational God. We believe the Christian God is a trinity, a triune God. Father, Son, Holy Spirit exists in a relationship. And it says in Scripture that we were created in His image. So I believe He created us, and we'll talk about this more as we go on. He created us to be in relationship. And we have an internal drive to be in relationship. But I think that internal drive oftentimes gets distorted and messed up and maybe becomes overpowering. To the point, as our author, we're studying a celebration of discipline. And today's message is titled Celebration of Discipline, Ambiverts, Monophobes, and Enochlophobes, and we'll get into what all that means. But our author of A Celebration of Discipline, Richard Foster, says this. He says, the fear of being left alone petrifies people. And he talks about a kid going to a new school, how scared they are that they won't fit in, or a person taking a new job, or talks about people in nursing homes, how they wish that they could just die because they have no one. And how this desire for a relationship, when it's not met or when we think it might not be met, can literally almost paralyze us with fear. And I can relate to it because I remember when I started in college how desperate I was to be known. As soon as I got on college, I started memorizing names and started getting to know people and meeting them at parties and meeting them in the cafeteria and trying to remember names because I wanted to walk down campus. We used to practice our walk. I'm serious. We'd throw the backpack over and say, hey man, do I look cool when I do this? No joke. That's a sermon for another day. But I would say, hey Joe, how you doing, man? Hey Barbara, good to see you. And I would just bam, bam, bam. I wanted to be the guy on campus who knew everybody. And I remember specifically that I would never go to Winslow cafeteria alone. Winslow was the cafeteria on campus. And I remember at lunchtime, I would not go in that place by myself. I was what we'll discover in just a moment, a monophobe. I was afraid of being alone. And so I would call friends, hey man, you want to go get, okay, cool. Hey man, you want it? No, okay, good. And if I couldn't get someone to go to the cafeteria with me, I would go get it to go and go back to my room and sit and eat. Because there's this stigma attached to someone who eats alone, isn't there? But we're all aware that there are introverts and extroverts. And I used to be an extrovert, and I've become an introvert. I don't want to be around you guys at all nowadays. But I was the guy who fed on energy of other people. And if I didn't have it, I felt empty and alone and lonely and terrible. But I've learned the discipline of solitude, which is the topic for today. I've learned that there's like an art form to solitude. There's something joyous about being alone. And so, if nothing else, I hope we'll get past the fear of being alone. There's no need to fear. There's people who totally fear being alone, and they're called monophobes. They're a fear of loneliness, the fear of being alone. And on the other end of the spectrum is Enochlophobes. And Enochlophobes are people who are afraid of crowds. They're afraid of interactions. And some of you are nodding your head a little bit right now because you know that you're on that end. There's lots of heads nodding. This is often tied into agoraphobia, which is the fear of open spaces. And there are some people who never leave their home. They just get in. And I have family members that if the car breaks down, they want me to call the mechanic instead of them having to call the mechanic because it would require interaction. But we're not talking about those people today. Actually, we are talking about those people today, aren't we? Wait a second. We're talking about one end of the spectrum here, and it's the spectrum that deals with solitude. That it's okay to be on this end of the spectrum. It's okay, this end of the spectrum, it's okay to be somewhat introverted. It's okay to be alone. There's nothing wrong with going to a restaurant and sitting by yourself. And in fact, I'm hoping to challenge you to do it. But I think scripturally, there's this other category that people have heard of, and it's called an ambivert. And an ambivert is the very blessed individual who can recharge in any situation. They feed off of people, and then they feed off of being alone. And they're just comfortable in their own skin. And those people are very few and far between. But I'm hoping that as we study the discipline of solitude, that we will move more in that direction of just being comfortable in our own skin, wherever we are, with whomever we're with. And our author says this. It's kind of a long quote, but I thought it was worth mentioning. Solitude is more of a state of mind and heart than it is a place. It's real important that we get that. There's a solitude of the heart that can be maintained at all times. Crowds, or the lack of them, have little to do with this inward attentiveness. It's quite possible, notice this, to be a desert hermit and never experience solitude. That's just loneliness. Solitude is something different. He says, but if we possess inward solitude, we do not fear being alone, for we know that we are not. That's the key to effective solitude. It's okay to be alone here because we know we are not actually ever alone. It's the good Father that we mentioned before. You are never without a friend. You are never truly alone. And that's where the blessedness of solitude comes in. And it says, neither do we fear being with others, for they do not control us. When you're that person that's comfortable in your own skin, and you're comfortable being with or without, then people can't manipulate you. You are who you are, and you're going to be who you are. In the midst of the noise and confusion, we're settled into deep inner silence. Whether alone or among people, we always carry with us a portable sanctuary of the heart. It means there's always some place to run for safety, and that place can often be a place of aloneness. Henry David Thoreau said this quote. He said, "The mass of men exist in silent desperation." I think that's such an incredible quote, and it's so true. How many people are there that truly are who they are, and they're comfortable with who they are? They're at peace with who they are. They can be alone, and it's no big deal. They can be in a crowd and not be manipulated. It's a rare individual, I think. And I think when you encounter people like that, they leave a mark. And that's partially why I think talking about solitude is so important, because I think if you can get the confidence to go sit at a diner and have dinner by yourself, and you're not trying to milk it where people will notice you, you're not trying to get on your phone and bury your head like an ostrich, but instead you're just having dinner, and it doesn't matter whether you're with someone or not. I think a certain confidence fills you. I think something happens to you that is powerful and makes you effective in your communications with other people. The author says this as well. He says, loneliness is inner emptiness, but solitude is inner fulfillment. Jesus went off to be alone constantly. Here's a list of just a fraction of the times in Scripture that we see Jesus running off for solitude. When he started his ministry, he did it with 40 days alone in the desert. Right before he publicly came out and said, "Hey guys, I'm here," he went for 40 days by himself. Before he selected his 12 disciples, he went off and spent a night alone. When his cousin John the Baptist died, it says he withdrew to a lonely place. After he fed the 5,000, he went up to the hills by himself, and it goes on. This one here, this is his common practice. In the morning, a great while before day, he rose out and went to a lonely place. When his 12 went out and came back, he said, "Come away by yourselves to a lonely place," and so forth. And then the last one in the Garden of Gethsemane, right before his consummate work, which was hanging on a cross to die for us, he wanted to spend the night alone. But was he actually alone? And see, that's the ticket. He knew he wasn't actually alone. He withdrew from everyone to get in the Father's face. And it was his common practice to do that. Now, he was somewhat of an ambivert because we also see constantly he's surrounded by people, touched by people, but probably on where he recharged, it was more on the introversion side. We see that he would go out to the masses, he would preach to the masses, he would touch the sick, he would touch the lepers, he would heal people, but then he would withdraw by himself to get recharged. And so why do solitude? Why be alone if you don't have to be? That would have been my question in college. Why be alone? It doesn't make sense. So let's talk about a few reasons. One is it cultivates art. I see my buddy Termaine sitting here. You're always going to get picked on because you sit right there, and it's a beautiful thing. But Termaine's an artist. He does beautiful oil paintings, beautiful drawings, etchings, sketchings. He's a very, very talented guy. So I have a question for you. What percentage of your artwork has been done in some degree of solitude, would you say? Yeah, exactly. You take the greatest painters that ever lived, and if you look at their life, guaranteed they did a lot of work alone. Kess over here is a guy that people all over the country are calling to say, hey, will you play guitar for us? How much of your guitar practice has happened in a group? Not much. How much of your guitar practice has happened by yourself? A lot. So whether you want to be a poet, a painter, or a flutist, you have got to invest that quality solitude. You will never be an artist until you're comfortable in solitude. And I have to wonder how many great artists will never live because they're afraid of being alone. It cultivates the arts. Number two, it saves lemmings. You guys are familiar with lemmings. The idea and what people believe about lemmings is that lemmings are mindless drones that will follow one another off of a cliff. And so lemmings are known to move in herds, and the idea is that one will fall off a cliff to their death, and the others will go, hey, I'm just going to follow that guy. And then over and over and over, boom, 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 they'll fall off of cliffs. And I actually have a video of that here for you in just a moment. But solitude, it prevents groupthink. It really does. When you can get off by yourself and think. Now see, Christianity was never meant to be a religion of groupthink. It is meant to be a religion of unity, but it's meant to be a religion of unity among people who have thought it out and entered a personal one-on-one relationship with God. And so it's just a fact, and there's studies that show this, that if you enter a room with a bunch of people and some ideas are brought out, typically the majority of people will follow the ideas of whoever is the most loudly spoken, charismatic person in the room. It's just a fact. That's how groupthink works. You look at the bombing of Pearl Harbor is a great example that people often use of groupthink. And at Pearl Harbor, apparently the Americans knew months ahead of time that this attack was coming. And yet some of the uppity-up people, the higher-ups in the organization said, well, first off, even if they come, they cannot destroy us. We're too powerful. Secondly, we would detect them coming all the way across the ocean. Somehow we would know. And thirdly, there's no way torpedoes fired from planes could sink our battleships. And these thoughts permeated the entire military, and so no one prepared. They just said, we're too tough for this. And you see what the results were. And there's lots of examples in history where groupthink was destructive. But Christianity is not meant to be a religion of groupthink. You find passages in Scripture that say, beloved, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits to see whether they are from God. In other words, whatever I teach, and there's passages like this. If I teach you guys something like this, don't just accept what I'm saying. Go off, study it, think about it, and decide for yourselves. It says, work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. It's on you. It's not on me. It's not on your group. It's on you to be personally connected with God. Now, let's talk about the myth of lemmings for just a second. Here's the video called White Wilderness, and it's a Disney clip from years and years ago. And this is where the myth of lemmings was propagated first. And lemmings do not actually do this. What happened in these videos is they herded up a bunch of lemmings and manually moved them towards a cliff to where they all fell off. This is the truth. It's the sad truth of the cliff. Fortunately, they used water instead of just rock at the bottom. But that myth has been propagated by voices so long that when I mention a lemming, most people, the first thing that they think is that lemmings fall off of cliffs. So the example that we have for groupthink is actually a perfect example for groupthink because most everyone believes this when it actually isn't really true. And if you had gone off in solitude and studied lemmings, you would know that. It promotes intimacy. When you think about a husband and a wife and you mention the word intimacy, are they in a group or are they alone? It's very simple. Now you can obviously be intimately connected with God in a room like this, and that's our prayer. Our prayer is that when you come in here and you worship God, that you do connect with Him intimately. But I'll tell you how you can tell the real deal about your personal spiritual life. It's what happens in the car on the way home. It's what happens in your bedroom when no one else is around. Do you crack that Bible open? Do you worship? Do you pray? Are you passionate about God? Do you have conversations out there? That's a kind of a litmus test as to where you stand with God. Some of that is. And it's about being alone. And if you're never alone, you never get to experience that kind of personal intimacy with God. And so there's no question that solitude promotes intimacy. My sister Abby posted this on Facebook this week, and I can't read it right there. I'm going to do my best. She said a pause and then a photo. A pause is a word that we're going to talk about when we talk about solitude, but she says, I'm taking this picture. She says, you're alive right now because Jesus wanted a friend for all eternity. She says, take a second to think about him and your life and the truth that he is quite in love with you. And that is something that happens, and like we've talked about already, solitude isn't about a location. It isn't about whether there is a crowd around you or not. But when you stop and pause and realize, it's just me, and it's just God, and that's enough. That is solitude. That's the discipline of solitude. When you take that moment to say, God is in love with me. That's intimacy. And it only happens when you and your brain turns toward God and gets away from everything else going on around you. So intimacy is bred. And I wanted to mention this, and I wasn't sure how to say it, but I just believe that God's in the process of writing great love stories and that solitude is a huge part of that. I know there's a lot of people that hate being single. I know there's a lot of people who, and our culture does it. I mean, Aunt Edna is always twisting your cheek saying, when are you going to find a man, right? We are in a culture that says, when are you going to become complete by finding a partner? And that's a messed up culture because you don't have to have a partner to be complete. You don't have to have a partner to be connected with the God of the universe and to change lives and to be used by him. Now, it makes sense that you want to be with someone, but here's what I believe. I believe that God can take your life, and I think my sister Abby is a perfect example of that. She's single and she's ministering to prostitutes and orphans all over Asia. She has just taken her life of singleness and said, I'm going to invest this in something important. And she's filled with joy constantly, and she is not in a relationship. And I think that can happen for anybody. Everyone has this period of singleness in their life, and it's a great time. One of the best times of my entire life was after I learned something about the discipline of solitude, and I saved up money, and I picked up a backpack, and I vanished to Thailand for 3 weeks by myself. Just took money, got on a plane, and landed there and thought, I'm going to see what happens. And I'm telling you, it was absolutely transformational for me. It was just being free to be me with God. And here's what happens. When people who cannot exist in solitude, but they exist in loneliness instead, when two lonely people connect, it typically doesn't end up as a great love story. A great love story happens when two whole people, two people who are okay with solitude, come together, and they know that I'm okay, and God's okay, and they're confident. They're that person in the green in the picture of the crowd that says, I am comfortable in my own skin. And when two people who are comfortable in their own skin get together, my opinion is that great romances happen. And so don't let the world, the devil, your dad, or anybody tell you that if you're not in a relationship that you're wounded and broken. It's absolutely not true. So what do we do? What does the practice of solitude look like? And my first advice to you is to learn to cut lemons. The author puts it like this. He says, there are an infinite amount of tiny solitudes strewn throughout your day. There are constantly these moments where it's you and just you. Even when you're in a room full of people. Say you're in a bustling kitchen and you're trying to prepare a meal, but you're assigned the task of cutting lemons. Chances are you're the only one sitting there cutting lemons. You're the only one doing the task. You are, in one sense, alone. And what he would suggest is that you take those moments to breathe and feel joy. You take those moments to be excited about something. You take those moments to feel secure about where you are. It can be as simple as walking to the mailbox. You walk to the mailbox and you have a task to do. And if you're task-centered, you think, I'm going to go get the mail. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go get the mail. I open it. I pull the mail out. I go inside. And in my case, I put it in the mail pile. And I eventually get around to opening the mail pile. Or I can walk to the mailbox and I can notice life, and I can notice me, and I can connect with God, and I can move at a little bit slower pace, and I can say, wow, the clouds are beautiful today, and man, clouds are a reminder that God is a provider. And I can see the concrete on our driveway, and I can think laborers did that concrete, and they learned how to do it, and out there right now, there are laborers everywhere, and they're working hard, and they're building roads, and I can think, wow, amazing. There's people that are working way too hard. There's people whose backs hurt them because they're down over doing concrete work all the time. Their knees don't work right anymore. And I can feel sympathy and empathy for the world just because I took this one moment of solitude to look around. And your life is filled with those solitudes. The author talks about getting off the subway and walking home, making that a treasured moment in your life. And so I suggest that you find these habitual things that you do every single day. There are these minute little solitudes in your life, and learn to milk them for everything they're worth. He specifically talks about this. He says, slip out just before bed and taste the silent night. I don't know if you've ever done this. I've done it a bunch of times in my life. I'll be at a party, or I'll be with a bunch of people, and I will sneak out the back, and I will just go start and look in the yard. And suddenly everything's quiet, and everybody's not pulling me in directions where I feel like I either have to carry the conversation or contribute in a way that I don't want to do. I just need a moment. And you have those moments scattered throughout your life. And so that's the first step of solitude. That's a very simple thing that anyone can do. The next one, there's a video online called How to Be Alone. Look it up on YouTube and watch it. It's called How to Be Alone. And she talks about starting in the obvious locations. Now, what's the most obvious alone location? The bathroom. That's right. Learn to appreciate your time in the bathroom. I spend hours reading in the bathroom. It's a beautiful thing. But learn to appreciate that time. Don't take your phone with you. People FaceTime on the pot. What are you even talking about, okay? Just say, this is a moment that's built in, and depending on your diet, you can have 6 or 7 or 8 or 10 moments of solitude all day long, okay? Secondly, she talks about these places that are socially acceptable to be alone. And she mentions the library. So you can go and you can just sit and you can smell the books and you can read a book. Or you can just sit and think. And no one will think, what a loser. See, that's our fear, right? We're going to be the lonely guy and they're going to hit us with a spotlight. You can get away with this at the library. Just go sit. Just go. And nobody's going to care. So start in the simple places. And she also mentions coffee shops. It's pretty common for a person to go into a coffee shop alone, get their coffee, sit and stare out a window. Because they haven't had their coffee, so they're a zombie. So there's a zombie stare out the window. And this is normal. So these are the places where you can start to practice solitude and you don't have to be threatened. You don't have to be afraid that anybody's going to think what a weirdo you are. But then she talks about stepping up your game, stretching yourself. Try going to a movie by yourself. Now, this is not a bad step because it's dark and nobody's really looking at you. Now, there is a little stigma to someone who sits alone in a theater and, it makes people feel awkward. I don't know why. But it's totally okay to go watch a movie by yourself. In fact, it's pretty fun. I would really encourage it, okay? So start trying to go to a movie. Then she says, step it up even more. Go to a restaurant. And the easiest place to start are these places that have the bar stools so that everyone's total strangers, but they get it that this is where the single people, the people who don't have anyone with them, this is where they sit. So it's not a big deal. But then get a booth by yourself. Dare ya. Oh man, it's so great. I've been all over the world sitting in booths by myself. And sometimes you sit there alone and just people watch and you see how spectacular life is. And sometimes people talk to you. You'll get in a boatload of conversations sitting in booths alone. Really spectacular conversations, which she mentions too. For me, this step was the golf course. For me, I would always call buddies, say, can we go golfing? And if I didn't have buddies to go golfing with, I wouldn't go golfing. And one day I said, I'm going to go golfing by myself. And now I love golfing by myself. It's just a moment for me to walk in nature and hit shots off into the woods and go search for my ball. And I'm all by myself, and it's a beautiful thing. She mentions benches. She mentions specifically conversations that will start in benches. And I've seen this at Walmart. I've seen it in New York City. I've seen it all over the world. If you'll sit in a bench by yourself, lots of times someone will come and sit next to you. That's what benches are for. You go to the mall and do this. So try to give people space and just sit by yourself and people watch. And you'll find out that a lot of times, not every time, maybe 20% of the time even, someone will come and sit down, say, hey, how you doing? My name is. And see what happens. And you won't be alone for very long. But unless you were comfortable in solitude, that event will never take place. Unless you're comfortable going to sit on that bench totally by yourself without anyone with you. And if you're doing that, somebody just assumes that your wife is in the gap and she's taking her time. That's what people assume. There's no stigma attached to that. But if you're comfortable going and sitting, people will come and talk to you. And then my final little piece of advice is this, is to run away. And I know some of you are thinking, yes, I get to divorce my husband now. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about quitting your job. I'm not talking about, vanishing and never coming back. What I'm talking about, and this is what the author of our book recommends, is that you take retreats by yourself. And it might start with just a 3 or 4 hour thing. You might think, I'm just going to drive down to Shelbyville and I'm going to sit in a restaurant and eat by myself and I'm going to people watch and then I'm going to walk the street and pray. I mean, it could be something as simple as that. Or it could be, and this is the Abbey of Gethsemane. I don't know if you guys know this, but this is about 45 minutes from here. And it's right next to what's called Bethany Springs, which was the Thomas Merton retreat center. Thomas Merton is a monk that we've talked about in here that believed in a contemplative life, a life of contemplation. And I actually booked my stay for this April. I'm going down there for 2 nights, 3 days, 2 nights. And you can stay at either the Abbey or at the retreat center. And what these monks do every single day, 8 or 9 times a day, they come in and they sing the Psalms. So they start in the book of Psalms in Psalm chapter 1, and over the course of, I think it takes them 3 weeks, 4 weeks, I haven't done the math, I don't remember. But they start at 3:30 in the morning each day, and then every couple hours they come back in and they sing one psalm together. They get up, they come in, they sing a psalm, they walk out. And anyone, anywhere, is welcome to come in and watch or participate. And they have all kinds of walking trails, and it's just apparently a very beautiful place and a great place. And at the Thomas Merton Center, they have some classes on contemplation that you can take. And so I've booked mine for April. This is the kind of thing I'm talking about when I say run away, is find a babysitter, find someone to cover for you at work, and just decide, I'm going to go by myself for a while, somewhere. It can be as simple as going downtown and walking around. It can be as complex as flying to an island somewhere and being alone. But I think it's really important. If you want to become the person in green, the person who's comfortable in their own skin, the person who's connected to God in such a way that says, me and you is enough, these retreats, I think they're absolutely invaluable. Our author says this, and I'll close with it. He says, we must seek out the recreating stillness of solitude if we want to be with others meaningfully. We must seek out the fellowship and accountability of others if we want to be alone safely. We must cultivate both. This is what you see in the life of Jesus, is he interacted with people all the time. Then he withdrew to be alone. Then he interacted with people. Then he withdrew to be alone. And so I'm not saying, in fact, I tend to think that the monks have it wrong. I get it that they think the way that they do, but I don't understand how you can effectively reach the world with the message of Jesus and take a vow of silence. I don't get that. I can see why people would take temporary vows. So I'm not suggesting that you become a hermit. That's not even remotely what I'm suggesting. But what I am suggesting are the steps that we talked about here, are steps where you become comfortable in your own skin, that you don't have to have people all the time. And I believe as you pursue that, so I encourage you to have lunches with people. I believe our church family is building through meals. I really do. I think you ought to be connecting with people constantly. But I also believe that you ought to be able to withdraw and face off with God and connect with Him.